Hey, so this is Cassidy and Kyle once again. This is Trigger Point Tuesday. We just got back from an event, Idea PT, and one of the things that I really saw during the whole conference was we were able to train, so many people, hundreds of people, and one of the things that we saw is when we told people to squat, nobody really knew how to squat. And there were certain variables that made me nervous when seeing people squat, and some of those, of course, were the ankle, the knee, and the hip, and the reason being is because the pliability that's been lost in a lot of the tissue ultimately is shutting down the fulcrum's ability to move, and that tibia and fibia and that femur do have to have some rotation there, not too much, not too little, but at the end of the day, so that we don't take the wear and tear into the knee, we have to make sure the muscles move as independent as one, right, Kyle?
And it goes back to our foundations. If the ankle doesn't move the right way, or if there's excessive motion in a different plane, then the knee and the hip end up paying the price. And ultimately, the spine even can pay the price from that as well.
Okay, so let's talk just for a brief second about this myofascial component. Myofascial means what?
Muscle and fascia,
okay,
tissue.
Right. So that connective tissue, one of the great exercises that I showed everybody this weekend, let's take your joint, let's put them there, and let's really start to move the joint. And what you'll find is the hands really start to heat up. And now let's think about this from a muscular structure perspective. And as you continue to move, it continues to heat up. And then what happens when you stop exercising, Kyle?
It just sticks.
Oh, so then I'm in a sedentary position. I stick in this position. And most of the time people says, hey, you know what, I need to stretch, right? Yeah. You ever stretch back in the day when you were doing all your power lifting, Olympic lifting, all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm going to stretch, and all of a sudden, I'm going to get it back moving again. And as I get it back moving again, I rip it all away. Grab a big stock of beef jerky, peel it in half, see all that white stuff. That's what you're doing to your muscle. It's not real good, is it?
It's not good at all.
Okay, so let's look at this movement. Stand to the side for us here. And what I want you to do is just go down into a squat for me here. And this is kind of a typical squat. You see the upper body come forward. You see the activation in the knee, activation in the hip. But you see all this, look, he has no blood flow right here in his ankle at all. It actually turns white. You're a pretty dark dude, but right here you're like whitey white. Go ahead and stand up for me again. And so what's the reason for that, Kyle? Let's talk about the fulcrum lever association and why that's occurring.
Something in the ankle is, or something around that posterior lower leg is shutting it down. So if we want to get technical about how that ankle joint is supposed to work, whenever we drop into a squat, dorsiflexion is also associated with what we like to call a posterior glide of that tibia on top of the foot. If it can't do it, it just jams up. Now he gets that torso leaning forward again because now the hip has to compensate. Lose range of motion in the ankle, now the hip has to gain it. It shifts center of gravity, it shifts the way we distribute load, and ultimately changes everything about lifting.
Interesting. So you're a pretty strong guy. You lift a lot of weight, right? Yes. So let's go back down into that squat one more time. And so the idea is you're a CrossFit geek, right? You love CrossFit. You love the functional style of training. But the problem is what happens, go ahead and come back up and go back down. Look at this antib come forward. Look at that antib. Look at the structure here within the antib. But what I really want you guys to see, go ahead and go back up and then go back down in the squat. I want you to look at the knee, look at the knee, look at the knee, look at the knee, look at the hip, look at the hip, look at the hip. Go back up. I want you to look at this again. Watch the knee. Roll your pants up there for me. Okay, watch this. Watch the knee, watch the knee, watch the knee. Now watch the hip, 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 hip. Okay, so if I have him in this position, unfortunately, he's so loaded in his heel that I can push him over instantly. So from a CrossFit or a functional style training, all that kind of stuff, what we have to do is we have to load the ball of the foot. Now, there's a couple ways that we can do this. Go ahead and pull your shoes off for me here. And Kyle, just jump in here when you see something that we need to address. Go ahead and put your foot right on top of your heel right on top. Now we're going to go through this movement again. Okay, go. And now, see, we've already loaded right there, the center of the quad. Can you feel that?
Yes.
So all of a sudden, I can't push you over as easily. Go ahead and go back up.
Now, the relationship of the hip and knee is better as well. There's more simultaneous movement through there instead of so much through the knee and then that hip engaging later.
So what you're saying is we're moving the tibia, fibia, and femur at the same time, so therefore the knee and hip joint are moving at the same time as well.
Weight distribution through those joints seems to be more appropriate.
Perfect. Pull your foot off of that. Go back down into that movement. And look at those little toes. Wow, you're flexing here instantly. So the extensors are saying, whoa, I don't know what I can do. And I can all of a sudden push you over and I'll hit you in the face. Yeah. Sorry about that. So go ahead and have a seat on your butt there for us. And we're going to do two things here. I'm just going to very quickly mash and scrub through the soleus here, okay? So we're going to go into this position here, and we're going to mash side to side. And I know that sucks for you, right?
And now this type of motion, this type of mashing side to side, remember that's creating or allowing that mobility through those fascial planes.
And the muscle is a non-compressible cylinder, therefore we're building tension into the muscle. As we rotate through, we're going to free up the myofascial component, right?
So we're taking it through range of motion without load. I think a lot of people miss that. That normal stretch you were talking about, most people are loaded as they're doing that stretch. That compresses the joints. Here, ankle joint is decompressed. It's a little bit distracted, so we get better motion through all the connective tissue.
Awesome. Pretty tender there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, grab a ball for me real quick, Kyle. I'm just going to do this for you real quick. And so just go ahead and flutter that foot. Feel that range of motion. Perfect. Got a ball right here. And you can do this up against the floor right here. I'm just off. Here's the bone here. I actually like to use the quad baller just in this region, just like this. But for time's sake, I'm going to take this ball, I'm going to push in here, take a deep breath for me, and release. Oh, yeah, Daddy. I know that's tender. Deep, deep breath, and release. Come up with a foot, and slap it down. There's one. Up with a foot. Slap it down. There's two. Give us some feedback, Kyle. Up with a foot.
Anterior tibialis is one of those that's often forgot about. You know, these days people go after the calves because they're nice and tender, and that's great. But we have to remember the other side of that joint. If that soleus and gastroc complex are locking down that posterior chain, the front side, that front chain, is also compromised in some respect.
So the idea is your antib's going to come right through here, come right up, and attach right on the outside of there. And when we looked at the cadavers several weeks ago, and we looked at that antib, it's a pretty powerful muscle, but the extensors that are up underneath it, they'll all adhere together and then function as one. Okay, go ahead and stand up for us real quick. Let's see what we did here. So let's turn towards the camera. Let's make sure we get this. Now let's go ahead and go through that same range of motion. And what we instantly see now, the toes are already relaxed. Go ahead and come back up and back down. The knees rotating outward nice. We're loading through the center of the quad. Back up.
So we're back to getting that better relationship between knee and hip, much the same way as whenever that heel was elevated.
Okay, turn towards me. Turn around. Let's look at the opposing side. Let's see if there's any change there. Look straight off to the side. Camera, make sure you get this. And see, once again, you see these toes want to flex up there. Go ahead and come back up. And back down slowly. Knee, 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 knee. Hip, 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 hip. Go back up. And down. Knee, 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 knee. Hip, 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 hip. Turn around. And so here, all of a sudden, go down into it. Quad, 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 quad. Hip, 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 hip. So we've changed the distribution here. So now he's got the structural integrity through that squat. We didn't have to raise his heel in order to get that. And then there's more structural integrity, right?
More structure, more strength. It's going to be a safer lift, better movement overall.
So the idea here, Kyle, is very simple. Now, we didn't raise your heel there.
No.
It felt like we raised your heel, right?
Right.
Well, how does it feel like you raised the heel? Because what we've done is we've allowed that soleus and that posterior chain, lower leg chain, to lengthen. And as it lengthens, then we're going to be able to seed into the ball of the foot more versus just the heel. And as that occurs, then we're going to reduce the strain on the antib. So then we're going to allow that to function more freely. We're going to bring that knee over the toes, give you more range of motion, and be able to load the center of the quad and the glutes more. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's that fun length-tension relationship we always like to talk about. Muscle at its proper length is going to produce the most amount of force. It's going to be able to reduce the most amount of force, and it's going to stabilize all those joints better.
Awesome. So lastly, let's follow up here. If you need a greater range of motion, obviously we go into the quads, loosen up the quads here a little bit more as well. But just turn around for me real quick. Let's just talk about this real quick. Turn, 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 turn. And I want back of the leg here, Kyle. So your posterior lower leg, let's talk about soleus, let's talk about gastroc. It's all going to come up, and it's all going to wrap, and it's going to connect right up in here, right? It's going to go above the knee, correct?
The gastrocnemius crosses right over and kind of intertwines, if you will, through the hamstrings.
So as I push forward, go forward with the knee, that means if you don't have the proper length-tension relationship here, that heel is going to want to pop up instantly.
Heel will pop up, maybe the foot will roll flat, maybe the foot turns out too much, and that's going to jeopardize the knee. So a couple of things could happen.
Awesome. So when we're talking about dorsiflexion in the foot, and we're talking about closed chain dorsiflexion in the foot, you're going to go to the next joint and try to find it because it's not an open chain movement. So we're going to push that knee forward. We're going to strain all the muscles in the posterior leg here. Now switch around for me real quick. Turn around for me. And then what happens is I'll lock this up, go forward. Look at this, the strain here in the anterior tib is what will happen. And as we create this strain on the anterior tib, once again, it's going to come through the arch, wrap around, attach on the lateral side of the knee. So then that tibia and fibia, it's going to lock down its ability to move. Now here's the coolest part. That myofascial opposition that we'll geek out about maybe next week is that sartorius thing comes in and supports from the other side. So it's just a nice girdle effect that occurs so that we're going to stabilize the knee on this real structural standpoint, but then the big bulky muscles, those quads, then can then come in and take it over, correct?
Yes.
So idea here, once again, if you want a better squat, if you want to move more freely in a functional space, we really have to load the center of the foot here. But with all the tissue in the posterior leg and the anterior leg that's tight, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to be forced to load the heel, and when you load the heel, there ultimately can be compromise because you're not going to be able to increase the intensity or the load because you're not going to be able to control it. You're only going to be able to get it up and down. You're not going to be able to move it in multiple planes of motion.
And when we look at function, that's what we need. We have to lift, but we also have to move it.
Awesome. Well, this is Cassidy and Kyle once again. Thank you, Adam, for the modeling the legs for us here in the squat. It was a great job. Bottom line here, if you want to move better, pay attention to our Facebook page or our YouTube page because we're going to give you education every Tuesday. Cassidy, Kyle, Adam, once again, thank you. We'll see you next week.